probably be open to some Q&A afterwards. But I know that, or I think that there's some challenges, especially for some emerging artists perhaps, where pricing is like, well, how much do I charge for this? And how important, another thing would be, how important is it to keep the work really fresh and new? If you're showing in a small town like Stewart and there's only several places to exhibit, you want to keep your work fresh, and why that's important when the same people are going from place to place. So without further ado, again, this is Janeen Mason. Please give her a warm welcome.
So I'm just going to sit down since we're small. Can you hear me all right?
Sure.
Okay. Thanks. It's fun to be in a room of artists in my hometown, right? So I work in Tukwesta, and I have for about 6 years now, and it's interesting. It's really interesting, but this is my hometown, so thanks for having me come. Thanks for asking.
Sure.
I don't know that I have any magic for you, but what I can do is tell you as much as I do know, okay? How many of you have made your living making art? Okay. And so, do you have problems pricing your art?
Not at this time, but, you always question whether you're doing it right.
And how about you?
Well, I taught dance for many years, and I just didn't have any money, but it was very rewarding. And did choreography and put on shows and had a nonprofit and all of that. It was a lot of work, but I never had any money.
But isn't it interesting? Did you hear how
It
she
was
said
rewarding.
very rewarding?
I loved it. I would never have left that.
But we're artists. I mean, like, we do it because it feels good, right? And then, you have to make a living in it. So I've been working the last couple of days with an older artist who spent her lifetime as an alchemist. I'm actually showing her work, and so I want to invite you down to see her work. It's fabulous, and I just installed it, just finished before I came.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't have any labels yet, but oh my God. So write this down, October 7th, okay? We're gonna have a special reception for her on October 7th. It's Gail McCarthy. Do any of you know her? She's a ceramist.
No.
Okay, well, the work is really, really exquisite. It's atmospheric, so she's reducing in an electric kiln, and these are fumed. So she's making things that are Persian luster glazes. She considers herself an alchemist, okay? And these glazes are just exquisite. You know how raku will eventually lose its color? These never will.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they will. So, yeah. So you have to come down and see. Okay, so October 7th, come down, we'll have fun. 4:30 to 7:30.
Where's the location?
Oh, I'll give you a card. Okay. Okay. And on top of that, at the same time, we're doing I've been doing 2 shows concurrently since we reopened the gallery. So right now I have Women in the Visual Arts, which is a membership group that's mostly south of Tukwesta, but it's an interesting group. And if there's anything that if they were to ask me for my advice, I would say, learn how to take better pictures of your work. Okay? So if I were giving general advice, I would say that to you too. Make sure that you take really good pictures of your work. It's so important. And then the other thing is, don't wait until the last minute to send in your applications. You know why? Because the people who send in their applications early are the ones who end up in the magazines.
Marketing.
Yeah. So it wasn't the best work that got into 4 magazines in Palm Beach County. It was the work that I had. The best work came in right at the end, and I was like, what are you going to do? So don't wait until the last minute. If you're going to show, send your work early and send really good pictures. I know, but you want to talk about pricing. So here's what I have to say about pricing. Everybody has a hard time with that. It all depends on if you're making your living at this, if you have to pay your rent doing what you're doing. That's what it comes down to. If you're doing this because you can afford to and you have the time, and it's lovely, and your friend is getting $3,000 for a painting, so you should too, then you might wanna, consider, unless that's really all you want, it's just like, I don't know, admiration. Did you wanna sell one? Then you might wanna talk to people that you can trust, who don't have a vested interest in what you're doing, and start to price it so that it will sell, and then build on that. There's a magic area between what the market will bear and what it won't. Once you go over that, you're not liable to sell, unless, of course, you end up with a collector. So I've had an interesting career in the arts. All I can tell you is what I know personally and what I'm doing now, right? If you were to come and sit down at my desk and show me your portfolio, I would have no idea what to tell you to price things at. Until we started to talk, and then I might know like what's too high. Or at least I would have a feeling for what's too high, for the market that I have, for the people that come into our gallery, right? But there's a part in you that knows what you're willing to let go of something for too. And so you need to find that spot, like So tell me about one of your dad's pieces. How do you price those?
Oh, it's really hard. This is a secondary market for where he was known, which was the Northeast, but it was also 25 years ago.
So you've got two things going against you on this. Did he have a reputation as a painter 25 years ago?
Yes.
Do
And
any
he's
of those people know about him now? Know about him here?
dead.
Okay. So,
Most of them are.
so the prices that he got then, are you using those prices now in this market?
No.
Why not?
Because people down here don't know his work like the people up north did. I keep the prices on the oils and canvas work high. The works on paper, which I literally have hundreds of, and kind of frame as I go along and sell a couple things and get more frames, and I can fortunately do a lot of the work myself. He taught me in his gallery and frame shop how to cut mats, how to cut glass. So as things move, I'll get more things out of the drawers and, order frames and that sort of thing. But the canvases, I think, are more precious than the works on paper.
Because
So
they're never gonna be more.
No,
Once
never.
these are gone, they're gone. Is that important to anyone besides you?
that they're,
That they're never going, there are not going to be any more of these made?
probably not,
See,
maybe
it's so interesting, but I mean, it's emotional and yet it's real too. So how long do you want to hold on to these things?
well, I can't take it with me. I have no kids.
Right.
I have two brothers that have the same situation, and so we all have hundreds of my late father's work. They each have one daughter who I guarantee you will end up with a lot of art when both my brothers pass. We did a retrospective in the Hamptons
Mhm.
a couple years ago.
And did they sell?
Yeah,
Good,
they sold really well.
good. And who
Um,
did they sell to?
They sold to some collectors, some
From
friends that were still alive that we invited and had addresses for and were, still around, family, friends. And then, my younger brother is a sculptor and lives in the Hamptons, so he invited his community.
Okay.
But if it weren't for that, probably they'd be like, so what?
How did the prices compare to what your dad used to sell them for?
More,
You sold them for more?
yeah.
Okay.
But that's a really upscale community. This is an upscale community too,
Mhm.
really,
Mhm.
at some level, but, it's a hard sell.
So, but that brings us to this point too, because we're talking about this little town with this limited, we have this limited number of people who live here, right? Except for the ones who come from out of town. But with today's market, you're not limited to just this little town, right? Now we have, if you know about the internet, you know about marketing, there are opportunities that exist for artists now like never before. And we haven't even talked about galleries yet, right? So Dot, how about you? How do you price your work?
Well, I go by, I give myself an hourly rate,
Okay,
and I take my materials into consideration,
okay,
and, it's a very expensive, field
right.
to be in, what I do. My equipment is very expensive, and it's a very time-consuming art, so that's why I try to go by an hourly rate and keep track like that.
Okay,
And I also think some of my pieces have more of what I call a wow factor than other pieces do. They just come across as having a much, more, a grander presentation than other pieces do.
do they sell?
Yes,
And so you charge more for them?
I do.
So they have a high magic value?
Yeah, exactly. I call it a wow factor. They do, right. And so I tend to, those pieces make up for, I get a better profit margin on the ones that maybe take more work, more time, that I don't make as much on.
See, that wouldn't work for me, because I paint so slowly that I would be crushed if I kept track of my time. But I know the woman who is the CEO of the Lighthouse Art Center is a glass artist. And she's worked it out so that she goes by the square inch. She knows what she's got in it as far as time and cost, right, materials. So there are a lot of different ways you can go after this. Now, I show the work of Jason Newsted. He was the former bass guitarist for Metallica. And this can happen too, okay? I've had this, well, not this problem, but anyway. So the first time that Jason Newsted showed his artwork, so here's a guy who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The people who love him are crazy, right? I mean, I want to say crazy about him, but they're just crazy first, okay? And they will come from far, they'll fly in if they know that he's having an art show. And so they came from all over. He priced his pieces by the square inch. It was his second show at the gallery, at our gallery. His first one was down in Miami, and it was held during Art Basel, and he got all of this publicity because of who he was, and I mean, like, it was a whole different market, right? And he was so disappointed when we didn't sell as much. We sold. I was impressed with how much we sold, considering what he wanted for his paintings. But we're not Art Basel. We don't have international buyers from all over the world there, all vying with each other. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Who are
Can I
the
ask you a
buyers?
question?
Yeah, please do.
So you were talking about, if you want your art to sell, pricing it accordingly. So
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I've sold some pieces at the price I originally set. If I lower my prices, aren't I sort of devaluing the people?
And that's a really good question. Okay, so 2 stories. This is an old family story. So my great-grandmother had a grocery store, I don't know, somewhere in Wisconsin, and my father and his best friend used to work there in the summertime when they were young. And so this was one of my dad's stories. She had this big bag of coffee beans, and it was one of those, crank grinders. And so she'd have my dad and his best friend pour coffee beans in it. They grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, and they'd fill 20 yellow bags. And those are like, 39 cents a bag. And then they grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, and they filled 20 blue bags. And those were 49 cents a bag. And then they grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, and they'd fill, 20 red bags. And those are 99 cents a bag. And so they said, and my great-grandma said, some people won't buy cheap coffee. Okay, so that's the other thing. So there was a time, we were talking just before we got started here. When I was young, I worked for Burt Reynolds when he had the theater in Jupiter. And it was such a magical place to work. It was a great time. And when he understood that I was a painter, he started buying work from me. He ended up separating from the theater, and it was like a diaspora. All of us who worked there then separated as well. And I went into the art business for myself, and Burt was one of my buyers. He was a patron. And there was never a price at which he would not buy my art, which sort of scared me, because I was still, like charging little, right? And so, a really dear friend of mine was working as his manager, funny story. So, he would call when they were coming into town, and he'd say, like, do you have any new work? Well, of course, I will bring it down. And I'd stop breathing, I'd load up my car, and I can't tell you how many pieces I sold out the back of my car to Burt Reynolds. Isn't that wonderful, right? One day, I called Scotty, my friend. I knew that they were in town. I was trying to figure out what time I should be there. Do you know where he was? And I take down my mask for this. He said, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of sax. Do you know what I heard?
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you answer the phone? I was horrified.
Oh, sax.
Sax. I know, right? Oh my God.
From Houston and
So that was interesting because, I kept going up in prices, but it didn't affect me locally because I still had a patron, right? And then I got to the point where he got divorced. News broke that he was divorcing Lonnie and that he didn't have any money. I had this big painting that he had commissioned, and I didn't take a deposit for it, of course, because why would you, right? So then I had this big painting that was finished, that wasn't paid for, and that painting went on. I licensed that. It was the first piece of art, of fine art that I licensed. And it became the top selling 1,000-piece worldwide.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it didn't make a bundle of money. I mean, if I had 12 of those, I would have been in great shape. It made about $100 a week for 10 years.
Oh.
I know. And eventually I sold a painting too. So, so there are always opportunities. Okay, getting back to the pricing. When he stopped buying art, I was stuck. Because my ego had reached that level too, right? Cue the music. So it's hard to bring the prices down. It's hard to
And
bring
then
the prices
the
down.
other thing I've heard is if you're not selling your work, raise the prices because then people will think it's worth more,
I know, that's bullshit.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Rock and roll fellow
Jason?
Jason, what was he selling his for per square inch? Just
I don't think I can tell you that.
okay.
I'm doing another show for it, and so I wouldn't want to give you that information, but you have to figure it out.
Got it.
Okay?
Yep.
This times that,
Yeah.
divided by that.
But I mean, I've used a number by square inch for.
And how does that work for you?
It's easy because then I don't have to
That's what
figure
I'm
out
used to.
time.
And do they sell? And do they
material.
sell?
Yes, I had the
At that
best
price?
year I've ever had last year, and then January to June was the better than all
See, how
last
cool is
year.
that? How long did
And
it
then
take
it
you to get
flatlined.
to that? Oh, sorry. How long did it take you to get to that number?
Well, that's the first year I've ever been able to put all my attention to it,
Okay.
in
And how long have you
47
been doing
years.
this now? Okay. So would you be willing to help other people figure out what's real for them? Would you be willing to mentor somebody?
Absolutely.
She mentors
Anybody need to be mentored?
She mentors everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
she doesn't.
Good, because it's really, really valuable to have like honest feedback.
Because we have somebody in our community that sells, I've been painting over 47 years.
Mhm.
He's been painting 5. He sells his for over twice as much per square inch as I do, but he has a follow-on from his other art.
Okay.
And so it's an interesting dynamic to me, and I
Well,
know
it
it's
is,
only
isn't it?
one equation to be used, but I found it to be the simplest for me, because then it takes, it's funny, our leader, Mel, who's not here, she often will value or devalue paintings based on whether she likes them. And I have to giggle when I'm putting them on our website or whatever I'm doing with them, because I'm like, why don't you just pick a number for square inch and you go with it?
And go with
She's like,
it.
I can't.
I
So everybody
understand.
has their own way.
I wanted to add something too, that I was always taught that the wealthy collectors, they don't wanna buy cheap art.
Some people won't buy cheap coffee.
You know, how do you find these, you know,
Right.
these people, so other than going to Art Basel and stuff like that, so, you know, that's a challenge, is that, you know, you want a price for those guys, but,
But you have to find those guys first, or they have to find you.
Right. right,
Yeah, so generally, well, so I've had a few collectors like that have just stumbled across me, and it's been really lucky, and I haven't had to put work in galleries because I had somebody who was waiting for the work that they wanted, which is wonderful. And then when that stopped, right about the time I turned 60 and realized my ship was not going to come in, I went to work, which is how I ended up at the art center, right? So, but there are other things that you can do as well. Have you considered licensing work?
No.
it's not, maybe look into it, you know,
All right.
you
All
might
right.
know about it.
Write this down. Licensing Art and Design by Karen Leland. Karen is spelled C-A-R-Y-N, Leland, L-E-L-A-N-D.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. Licensing Art and Design by Karen Leland, C-A-R-Y-N. Leland. It's not a new book, but it walks you through that process in a way that just makes you go, oh, well, that's doable. Right? And so I write and illustrate children's books too, and that's all done as, I have 17 books now, and 15 of them have been done traditionally, so they're traditionally published. That means a publisher hires me and pays me in advance against royalties. And then the book has to sell for the book to earn out of its advance so that I can make money. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I've heard the term licensing, but I don't really understand what it means. Could you explain it?
Sure, of course. So I love your dress.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually painted something just like that. I'm kidding, but, you know, maybe I did. And,
You don't like her dress?
no, I did.
No.
But I didn't paint anything like it. And I'm telling you something that's not quite right when it comes to fabrics. But say you were wearing, a t-shirt design. That would do. Okay, so here we have a t-shirt design. If I love that t-shirt, I might think like, I wonder who did that. Because I have something that's sort of like along those lines. I could call that company and say, how do you acquire your art? That's how simple it is.
So it's like.
Oh, we have staff artists, we have staff artists, we don't, you know. Or, why do you ask, you know, like send us something, right? And Karen Leland's book will tell you what sort of percentages you can expect on things. So when something sells with your design on it, whether it's apparel or whatever it is, you get a percentage. And you can negotiate that percentage, and that's licensing.
So you're allowing them to use rights to your original, they're not really buying your original.
That's right. That's right.
But they can use it on their items and you get a royalty.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay? And it's all negotiated. And of course, you know that when somebody buys your original, they're not buying the copyright, right? Okay. So that, I mean, I know I haven't given you much to work with as far as pricing. If I can help you, come down and sit with me. I have a card. I mean, I'm happy to ask you questions until you get to a point where you think like, this could be the right price. And then you try to sell it and see what happens. If it doesn't sell, figure out why. Is the price too high? I mean, that's what we're always willing to go to, but maybe it's just the wrong market, or people don't know you, or you haven't done the advertising, or the right guy hasn't walked in yet, but he might tomorrow. Right?
But the problem is we need more than one right guy. We need
Oh, I
a lot
get
of
it.
right guys.
I guess.
That's an interesting thing that you're talking about now, as far as my late father's work. He was an abstract expressionist, and he was from New York City. So a lot of his work is, you know, dark by, you know, Florida standards. It's not this bright coastal. So that's another thing to consider is, in terms of market, is what are you painting? As an artist, you paint what moves you, but it may not move.
This area.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But yet you want to be true to yourself. You don't want to suddenly put a palm tree on everything. And,
No doubt.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then what do?
Right.
You find the market.
You find
That's
the
what you have to do, and you need to pay the rent.
Right.
If you're painting just because you can, then it doesn't done that.
So maybe this would be a good time to lead into the flip book. that-
Oh,
Yeah,
so we did this thing last year that you might find interesting, and it was because of COVID. I started doing these, like videos because I had shows that were scheduled and I had artwork, but nobody was gonna come in, we were locked out. One thing led to another, so my silly little slideshows, people adored because they could share them, right? So those who were showing with me could take that slideshow and send it to their kids and their friends and everybody everywhere who got to see what other type of work they were showing with, right? Which led us to Flipping Book. We bought an annual subscription to Flipping Book, and I was surprised at how affordable it was. Now, mind you, we're a 501c3 not-for-profit, we have a budget to work with, right? And so for us to spend, I think it was $1,500 for a year, unlimited, we could put out 100 flipping books if we wanted to, and that was a deal. So, I have this young assistant who's very smart and technically savvy. I don't know how to use InDesign. I'm okay with Photoshop. I'm like an 8 out of 10 on Photoshop, but InDesign is beyond me. So Jet figured out how to line up these pages beautifully in InDesign, and she loaded them to Flippin' Book, and we sent those books across the country. It's so simple. It's a click. Again, most of the success of Flipping Book for us was the fact that the people whose work I was showing were thrilled. They shared it. We had some sales, wasn't fabulous, until we got to something where emotion was involved. So I don't know if you're aware that in December of last year, we lost our director of education. She was shot.
Yes.
She was 32 years old. She was, they just bought their first house. She was supposed to be married on New Year's Eve. And they hadn't even moved into the house yet. She just had a birthday 7 days before she was shot. We had a shower for her, for the house, the wedding, anyway. So, anyone who knew her was crushed by this. We did a call to artists that were friends of hers or people that had shown with us or her students. She was a metalsmith, and asked if anyone wanted to donate their art, and we were going to have a fundraiser for her. So we got art from all over the world, but I never handled it. I never had to take possession of it. They sent the photos. We created a flipping book. People bought from the flipping book. We called the artist and said, okay, so this is your buyer and this is his address. And I think the catalog sold out. Very sad
It's
reason.
like flippingbook.com.
Yeah.
And do you post the flipping books on the Lighthouse website?
We do, and we share them through our e-blasts.
Okay, through like MailChimp or whatever.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. So we have something like that that goes out every Tuesday morning. But you might, does everybody have a website? Yeah. So you might want to consider as a group, investing in a flipping book that you could do your shows with. Like you could put whatever's in your show in a flipping book. The sales would come through the gallery, so that they would call the gallery, they would call the gallery, but they could still, the things that you have in the flipping book, I wish I could show you this, but it's not real. So you can click on an image in the book and it blows up, and if you want to buy it, you can buy it right now, and it will add the taxes and shipping and all of that, okay? It's pretty amazing. So, but what's real, what's on the other end? So whoever's keeping track of this, if it's the gallery, gets a bing, okay, there's money in your account, and so you have to let somebody know that it's gotta be shipped. That might be a nice thing for you to do. You could put all of your artists, you could have spreads for each artist, right?
Do you know if you have to use InDesign or you can use any kind of publishing?
I really don't know the answer to that.
Would Jet be available for a workshop though, for our group?
I'm sure she would be. She's getting married in January. She's taking all the work she can get.
Yeah, we can look into that, because that's something that if we can integrate that in and have it like through our account and.
Well, I'm just understanding now that it's volunteer to meet with Jet.
I mean, if anybody else wants to do it, go ahead. I know
I just created sign has a button you can push and it automatically puts it in book format, but it doesn't do the pop-up or the
Okay.
commerce side. So,
More than I know, we have to get Jen here, but I'm sure she'd come sometime, you'd love her too, she's. you have
That
to tell her.
sounds wonderful.
She talks about it.
Right now,
So-
we put the, once the show comes down,
Yeah,
we put images from each artist on the website, but they're just images, you know, it's not a flip book.
Yeah, but that would be a wonderful way that when a show goes up, like right now, every artist that's in the show could send that out to everybody,
absolutely,
you know.
absolutely, and you keep it fresh because you have new shows.
Right.
You can put videos in here.
yeah.
You can put videos in the flipping book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can put, like YouTube links and click on them and.
Agree for the tour, to advertise the tour, instead of putting the stuff on the website that we put on there, have a flip book on there for the tour.
That'd be wonderful for the chances for art.
The tour book turned into a flipping book online in years past.
Okay.
The problem with this past year was because of the gatefold map. I didn't do a deep dive to see if there was a virtual flip book that could manage that, so I did it in 2 pieces.
Okay, well, it's something to look into, anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing Jed's information with me,
Oh,
we'll have.
Get a hold of me and
Okay.
I'll bring it,
Sounds
doesn't
good.
drop
Okay.
it.
Wonderful.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the other thing is this, and it's important, because it is a small town, and if you're showing in different locations as a group, you absolutely must bring fresh work. You cannot be showing work that's been seen before in a new show when you have the same people coming. It must be fresh, or everything looks stale then, and you affect all the rest of the people in the show as well. And if you're known by the company you keep, those of us who have to pay the rent with our art, can't afford to be in business with you. So you must come up with fresh work. That's all I got. Anybody have any questions?
Did you want to talk about, photographers versus painters and how the
How
market
many
is
photographers
different?
do we have?
Well, we have 3 in our group.
But how many
Yeah,
are in the room
on
right
chat
now?
too so far.
Right,
Are you the only one here?
yeah, I guess so.
What's your name?
Mark Stahl.
Hi, Mark. The sad fact is, I don't know much about photography. I've had a couple of photography shows. They're interesting. I wouldn't know how to judge one. I sure don't know how to price them.
Sure.
Are you printing your plays?
Yeah, that's a misnomer in photography, because everything we do is a printed image. I
So-
print,
Yeah, tell me how you
well, I
print.
print my own work up to 16 by 20,
Okay,
and then anything larger than that, I shop out to color labs.
and so,
And I stick to limited editions with my photography.
what's the substrate? What are you printing on?
Well, either, again, smaller work is on archival papers of different types, and then larger, what's kind of hot is metal.
Okay,
Metal.
so do you mat and frame if they're the smaller ones? So you've got that hard content too?
Yes, and I
It
use,
seems to me, if you're back to the square inch price, because you've got all this hard cost
Sure.
involved. Unless you get to the point where clearly there's high magic value involved.
Sure. Okay.
Talk to other photographers, somebody that you can trust. Have you been at this for a long time?
I have.
And so you know plenty of people that you can talk to about this, right?
Sure,
To
sure.
compare.
New to this area, but, yeah, a long
Okay.
time.
Okay,
Ties to Wisconsin,
okay,
like your grandmother.
like my grandmother. I wish I could say more about photography, but really that's the truth. I
It's
have
tough,
to hire a juror and everything when I have photography.
Sure. And then you have, photo shows, at least once a year or so?
I've been there 6 years now and I've had 2 so far.
Okay,
Okay? Yeah, so,
I understand.
yeah.
Are there
Any
any
other
other questions for Janeen? That we can cut her loose and kind of get on with the meeting?
I could say for being here in the gallery, I 100% agree with what she said about new work.
Yeah.
People don't want to see the same thing in 5 places.
Right.
Right, they don't wanna see it here, and then at our gallery, and then at RCK,
Yeah,
and, yeah.
and we do talk to each other. I can't tell you how many times Robin being at the Elliott and I would converse with our juried shows
Sure.
about, wasn't this in your show? Yeah, no, it was just really similar, you know.
I showed this 2 years ago, didn't I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Small world, it's a
You know,
small
we
world.
talk,
Yeah.
we know.
And for those of you that don't know, this is Jennifer Hearn, who's an employee here at the Arts Council.
I think I know most of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just everything that I'm just processing, I just wanted to, it's not valuable necessarily, I just have had so many of these experiences. I've shown in Montauk, so I've shown in the Northeast. Could never price the way I priced up there down here.
Why not?
Just could never.
And why not?
Because the clientele is really different, and they got a lot more money, they expect to pay those prices,
Yeah.
because they just are in that mindset.
Mhm.
They're in New York, and that's what they see, and they're ready to spend it.
Would they buy it if it was half as much?
I had galleries that I was being represented by, one in particular was in Florida, and they told me my price point was too low.
Uh-huh, I've had to do that with people. too.
Yeah, which was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard.
This is where spreadsheets come in, people, I'm just saying, plug for spreadsheets.
And
No, but works the other way too, truly. Like, I was showing an artist one time whose work was so low that I called him and said, look, this is what I'm gonna do. I want you to double your prices. But before you do that, I'm gonna buy a piece of yours. Yeah, I'm gonna double the price on that, okay? And we'll see if it sells. And it sold by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, I knew I was right.
Yeah, it's, and then if I'm doing art fairs.
Yeah.
That's a whole other group too.
So you came down here, and how did you feel about bringing your price point down? How did that
Not
work?
bad, I just had to figure it out.
And how did you figure it
I
out?
love sharing my work, whether somebody's buying it for $5 or
See, that's
for
the other thing.
5,000. I just want people to
Right.
love it the way I love
Yeah.
creating
Right.
it, honestly, in the end. But it is the clients and where you are. Showing in Palm Beach, that's a whole other thing also. And then you have the galleries that'll say, well, my client's looking for a little bit, this. Can you modify? Can you do more of these types of paintings instead of your paper, your studio work? And I'm like, yeah. And then you gotta.
I love what you do. Can you do it different?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Sure.
Yeah, can you make it match my couch?
But so the good thing is that you're open to it. Like, it's not crushing you emotionally,
no,
or not,
no,
it's not
no.
stopping you from painting. You're
No,
still where you were.
I stopped doing murals.
Okay.
That crushed me. But that was the only thing that I couldn't do anymore. Otherwise, it's good. It's been interesting here that I just moved to this area, just to see. It's smaller than I'm used to, so there is the same people kind of. So that's interesting. I'm just kind of trying to figure out.
But it seems to me like you already have a brain trust here. If you just start talking to each other about, what's working and what's not, and you can take it from here.
But this is good to stimulate the conversation.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
recognize that it needs to be a discussion.
Sure. And if you
So
don't
thank you.
want to sell
Yeah,
it
thank
because
you.
you love it so much, because it's got that high magic value, you'll know the price that you won't come under, right? So, okay, so you keep it. That's your choice. But if you want to sell it, you might need to adjust it. Paint something else, or get photographs, or whatever. All right, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, what happens on October 7th?
The section.
That's, oh, I'm gonna turn this off.
Shameless plug.
And